Hey kids, welcome to Unit 3, Lesson 5, Enhanced for Loops, exercise number 2. We have an investigate and modify, or run the program to observe the results. Then experiment with the program by making the following modifications. Change one line at a time, then run the program after each change to observe the results. Try multiplying each value in the array by 2 in the enhanced for loop before the value is printed. What happens? Are you able to start at a specific index using this loop? What can you conclude about what the loop control variable is doing? Let's take a look at the code we're given. We have an array of values. It's storing a bunch of numbers. We're instantiating an object managers. It is of the array manager class. It is passing values as a parameter. Looks like we're printing off a statement with enhanced for loop and then manager numbers to string enhanced. So we're calling this method numbers to string enhanced. And then we're doing the same thing with numbers to string regular. Let's look at our array manager class. It has an array numbers. It is an integer. We have one constructor. It's passing numbers along. We have our get method getting numbers. We have our public string strings to numbers enhanced, and that's one of the methods we're calling. And it is creating a variable results, which is a string. It is empty. We have this for loop we saw in the last lesson. We'll come back to this in a second. And then we're returning results. And then we have that last loop, numbers to string regular. And this looks familiar. I've seen this in this entire unit. This is our for loop. We're creating an index that's set to 0. As long as the index is less than the array length we're looking through, we're going to do whatever's in the statement. This time it looks like we're taking results we created up here, and we're adding to that results every time the number array at a particular index. After that, we're going to increase our index up by 1 and then repeat the loop until this statement is false. Then we're going to return our results. Let's go back to my console. Let's hit run before we start messing with our code and see what happens. Looks like with enhanced for loop, we're getting 25, 82, 94, 13, 38. Those are my numbers of my value array. And my regular loop, 25, 82, 94, 13, 38. Looks like I'm getting the same numbers. That means our enhanced for loop is really operating the same way. And let's take a look at the anatomy here for a second. Still using the keyword for. Inside here, still have our numbers array, but nothing else looks very familiar. We're not setting an index. We're not progressing through it and checking to make sure we're not underneath it. Very different, but yet we're getting the same results. One of the first things to understand about the differences between a for loop and an enhanced for loop is why we use it. An enhanced for loop will only run through the entire array. Can't do partial numbers. Our for loop, on the other hand, we can look through any number as long as it's less than the index array. And remember our out of bounds exception error. That means if we only wanted to do the first quarter of an array, we could do that. But an enhanced array, we cannot. It's all or nothing. So you can see if it does only every element in the index, there's no reason to store an index because we're going to go through all of them no matter what. What is really happening here is we're creating a new variable, and it has to be the same data type as the array we're looking through. For this one, it's an integer value. We use a colon in between our new variable and our array that we're looking through. And what it's going to do is just look through the array at each element. And if you look up here, I borrowed this nifty video from code.org, and what it is showing is how we progress through an enhanced for loop. Again, same way as a regular loop. One thing I want you to note, that variable we're creating, it doesn't store the index, just the value in the array. That means if we change our variable, In our case, nums, we don't affect the array above. Now that we know that, let's run through these questions. Try multiplying each value in the array by 2 in the enhanced for loop before the value is printed. What happens? Again, this might be easier to see real quick if we do our regular for loop first, because we understand that. If we go down here and we want our results to be printed off one by one, we can just turn this into a simple equation, right? Our index that we're at times 2, still on a space. Now when I hit run, my regular enhanced for loop should be the same array, but my regular loop should be multiplied by 2. Well, let's see if I'm right. And you can see that worked. We're going to use the same principle with the enhanced for loop. This time we're adding the value, that new variable we created. Parentheses times 2, and we still want our space. Again, you could see my enhanced for loop, same numbers. Let's hit run and see if it changes. And now they're the same. Hopefully you're starting to see that value is really just taking place of that numbers at index that we use in our for loop. Are we able to start at a specific index using this loop? As we've taught kids, no, we cannot. Enhanced for loops, they can only be used to search through each element. If we have to look through just part of our array, then we're going to use a for loop. What can you conclude about what the loop control variable is doing? And this is an interesting question, kids. A loop control variable is simply our index. That's how we're progressing through. In our regular for loop, in our loop control variable, it's telling us where we're at in our array. Element 0, element 1, element 2, element 3. In our enhanced for loop, it is not doing the same. Remember, it's looping through everything. So there's no need for an index. It's just going to go through the element one at a time. In this case, our variable is acting like our loop control variable. But remember from that clip I showed earlier, it's just storing the variable, not the index. But if you want to think about it, it's going value 0, value 1, value 2, value 3, value 4. Always starts at 0, always goes through the entire array length. Key takeaways from this lesson really is the anatomy of an enhanced for loop. And if we take a look at it, we still use the keyword for. We still have a condition inside. This time, since we're searching through the entire array, we are declaring a new variable. We're going to use a colon to separate between our new variable and the array we want to look through. Then inside our for loop, our statement we would usually use. Again, we only use this when we want to search through each of the indexes. Think of this as just saying, hey Java, go to the numbers array, start at 0, look through everything, tell me what's in there. But remember, the concepts from everything we learned still hold true. We still have to get whatever is at each index, neither store it or print it. That doesn't change. And finally, kids, if you get a chance, I'll link to it down in the description. Go to code.org's video about enhanced for loops. It's only about 2 minutes long. Watch the whole video. It really is useful for understanding these lessons. Hopefully, though, this video helped you understand enhanced for loops a little better. As always, if you have any questions, come see me. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. See you later, kids. Bye.